Hi, I'm Joe Justice, the chair of the Agile Business Institute and CEO of Team WikiSpeed. And I want to share what I learned working in Tesla, where I operated Agile at Tesla. And I want to share how Agile works in hardware and complicated, regulated industries. In 2006, I founded my own car company, Team WikiSpeed. We grew to produce cars with more than 4,000 people all over the world. We set 4 world records, and the records we set were about speed, safety, efficiency, and low cost of new product introduction. IIL covered that in detail, and I'm excited for you to see the work I've done with IIL before in presenting what we learned about Agile hardware with Team WikiSpeed. In 2012, we became the first automotive manufacturer to accept Bitcoin. We were on the cover of Bitcoin magazine, issue number 3. Bitcoin was so new then, it was worth about $8 US per coin. Bitcoin goes up and down, but has crossed being worth more than $60,000 per coin. That was a really profitable move for us. Already, I want to introduce the idea of an Agile leadership team in your company. If your team is willing to inspect and adapt with reasonable risk really fast and take approvals of any idea from anywhere in the company, you can try some dramatically new thinking things like accepting digital currency as early as 2012. A lot of companies still aren't comfortable with the idea of digital currency now. And to be an early adopter where you get the largest win if your bet works, that's what I would call the product owner function, where you have people playing a role to say what's the highest business value for the lowest risk we could possibly do now. And it helps you think way outside the box. In 2020, I joined Tesla as a full-time employee. I was hired into the Fremont, California facility. That's the global headquarters now, although the global headquarters looks like it's moving to Austin, Texas, and maybe eventually even Berlin. I had full access, like all employees do, and worked with SpaceX and worked with all the Tesla sites around the world. I operated what's called Agile at Tesla. That is the Agile program for Tesla. That's in conjunction with Lean at Tesla, the established Lean program. And together, we worked with all Tesla sites, all Tesla operations globally, and with the boring company OpenAI, Neuralink, and SpaceX, all the properties joined together. Tesla's value went up 5 times while I was working there. 5x, 500%. This was called a 5-to-1 stock split. It's one of the largest company value gains ever in the history of publicly traded markets. And I got to be in the company while that happened and see how does the company really operate when something that big happens. I've made a chart here to index what made the stock price grow. And here's my best correlation: speed of new product introduction. This graph that I made shows how quickly Tesla makes changes in hardware on the production line, and software too, compared to other automotive companies. You can see at one point Tesla's total company valuation, its market capitalization, the total value of all stock traded, went over $800 billion US. And you can see Tesla changes the Model S, for example, more than 27 times a week, or about every 3 hours, in hardware. The next fastest speed of change company appears to be Toyota. Toyota does what's called a minor model change, changing the way the front bumper looks, maybe the types of glues used and some of the rivets, and maybe the software on the navigation, about every 2.5 years on a fast-tracked product, or every 4 years on a more normal cadence product. And you can see the total value of Toyota, at the time I measured it, my footnotes are below, was around $211 billion US. Next up, if we add all the major European auto manufacturers together, that's Volkswagen plus Daimler plus BMW. Now, Volkswagen includes MAN Truck and Bus, it includes Porsche. Daimler includes other companies too, like Maybach and of course Mercedes. And BMW includes Mini and other brands. If you add all of them together, the total company value is around $180 billion, or about a quarter of Tesla's company value. And you see, they're a little slower to introduce new product. To make a minor change to models on the production line, that's a 3 to 4 year event. In America, it's a little slower than that. All of General Motors and all the sub-brands, plus all of Ford and any sub-brands, and then all of Fiat Chrysler, now part of the Stellantis group, are a little slower. They're closer to 4 years for a minor model change. And the combined total company valuation is around $84 billion US. The case I'm making here is it's all about speed of new product introduction. That's the entire game. And that's what Agile means. I'll also say speed of new product development, NPD. So NPD plus NPI equals market capitalization. That's the game. And the executives understand this. I got to work with Volkmar Denner, the chair and CEO of all of Robert Bosch GmbH. They're based in Stuttgart, Germany, and they work all over the world, employing more than 390,000 employees. And Volkmar Denner told me and all staff, for Bosch, agility is crucial. It allows us to adjust to the increasing speed of change around us. Agility allows us to remain in a position as an innovation leader. You can see Volkmar is saying the purpose of agility is to innovate faster. Akio Toyoda, also a client of mine. I went to Japan for a year and a half to work with Toyota Motor Company and their supply chain, Denso, etc. Akio says, when you look at a product going to the actual sites, going to Gemba, that's the place the product is made, not just the place it's planned or designed, but the place it's made. What is important is to fuel the change point. Akio is saying the job of the CEO of a huge company like Toyota is to increase the pace of change, to fuel change. Herbert Diess, CEO of Volkswagen Group, which includes Porsche and Bentley, says exactly the same thing. The big question is, are we fast enough? If we continue at our current speed, it's going to be very rough. Elon Musk, my CEO, says pace of innovation is all that matters in the long run. You can see the executives get it. Agility means speed, and not just any speed, speed of new product introduction. And that means also speed of new product development. Agile new product introduction. So how does NPI, new product introduction, work in an ultra-fast company like Tesla? You've just seen the nearest comparator is taking multiple years to introduce hardware changes in mass production. And Tesla does it every 3 hours. How does that work? What does that look like? I've made a drawing to try to explain it. If you're in the production facility and you tape off a square or a hexagon or a circle, an area of the factory, and measure what comes in. So what's coming in are car parts and partially built cars from somewhere else in the factory. So I've drawn a picture here of some car parts coming in. In wherever you've taped off, demarcated that part of the factory, value add steps are going to be done. For example, we might be installing heat pumps into the cars that flow through there. And we might be gluing on garnish with a particular adhesive, so a plastic trim or a metal trim around the heat pump. And we might be installing rivets somewhere else on the frame of the vehicle as it passes through there. When new product introduction is happening like every 3 hours, that means multiple times a day, parts you've never seen before are coming to you. So how do you deal with that? In a traditional company, they'd shut the factory down, they'd train everyone, they'd recalibrate the machines, they'd procure new machines, they'd author new vending contracts. In a company like Tesla, it's happening every 3 hours, or even faster. So what do? You have automated tests of the parts coming in. And those automated tests are run based on software. And the software can be updated multiple times a second. So of course it can keep up with running with changing every 3 hours. This is what's called a definition of ready for agile teams. Is the backlog, the work, ready for the team? The definition of ready is almost always automated in a company like Tesla. Yes, there are some manual test fixtures, like a piece of metal, and you hold the new part that came in and see if it fits in the new piece of metal. And if it does, you can try to assemble it. But most of it's automated and no touch. Most of it's cameras using machine learning to heat map, highlight green, yellow, red, are things going to work. This includes logic testing, continuity testing, stress and strain testing, part number verification, material or metallurgy, what alloy is this made out of testing, and physical shape, surface finish, etc. So you have a battery of tests run all throughout the production facility testing definition of ready. Now, definition of ready, if it's on the other side of you, what's ready for the next part of you is, from your perspective, your definition of done. That's also complete automated testing. And you have red light, green light, yellow light, well, actually it's a heat map over the entire product, saying, is it ready for the next step? And if not, there's an immediate stop the line action, and it actually keeps flowing the line on another version, a version that already passes test, which I'll try to show in a moment. So you have these definition of ready and definition of done documents, which are simulated real-time virtual tests. And the results are on huge monitors everywhere and on everyone's phone. Now, inside this taped off piece of the factory, you have a small, co-located, cross-functional development team. And their job is to maintain the robots performing these actions and perform actions themselves. They load materials in, they unjam robots, they maintain robots, and they do manual actions themselves, applying adhesives, etc. And their actions change about every 3 hours. And your steps are part of your definition of ready and definition of done. This is what a traditional company would call a lean cell. And yeah, we use the word lean cell sometimes in Tesla too. So you have these lean cells that perform value-added steps for any parts, even if you've never seen them before, that meet the definition of ready. And your output is something that meets the definition of done, even if the next station has never seen it before. So how do we do new product introduction, new product innovation? We install what's called a router. A router is a robot that's controlled by software, and you can control the software on your phone. The router can branch parts to one lean cell or any other. And some of the routers are actually manual. They're humans pushing and pulling carts. A lot of them are robots on tracks or on treads or many different kinds of robots. So a robot, to start new product introduction, will branch exactly one set of parts. And anytime we do something to the input, we do the same thing to the output. If we can branch cars or car parts away from a lean cell, we also can branch cars back into that same flow. And that's a corresponding router. Again, purely software controlled, it can change multiple times a second. We will branch exactly one car off and send it to any empty area of the factory or even the parking lot outside under a tarp. And around that set of parts, we'll have another small, co-located, cross-functional development team. And their job is to improve those value-added steps. For example, they might design a new heat pump. In that team, you have procurement, software development, mechanical engineering, computational fluid dynamics, so measuring the flow of heat and electricity, finite element analysis, measuring stress and strain. Are these things strong enough? And the vendor selection is limited to companies that it can engage within 24 hours because these changes happen so much. So vendor selection is not cost driven like most other companies I've worked in. It's almost entirely speed driven. Can we get a prototype or a production intent piece in less than 24 hours? And not many vendors can. So most of these products are made in-house. So what this looks like, this new product innovation group or team, it's a group of maybe 6 people. Sometimes it's as big as 250 people, but maybe it's 6 people, maybe it's 1 person, and they're sitting on the concrete floor or on the blacktop outside with laptops, and they're drawing car parts, simulating them, running automated tests. They're on the phone with potential vendors, they're 3D printing parts, they're machining parts, they're cutting stuff, they're cleaning up the dust, and they're making exactly one part. When that part passes automated test, the definition of done, it's branched back in. In most companies, to make the logistics simple, companies try to introduce new product change on a given date. So on July 1st of the year, all new cars use a new vendor with a new glue. Well, Tesla doesn't do that at all. They have what's called a production ramp. So this new cell, this Agile new product introduction cell, made one car, or a piece that then went into the car. So one car has the new heat pump. Well, now they work on building up the capability to make that in mass. And maybe tomorrow they make 2 cars, and maybe the next day they make 100, whatever the ramp is. Those are example numbers. At some point, 100% of the production flows to the new product introduction cell. And that's the changeover point. Okay, how do you track that? How do you maintain that? How does that work? A lot of companies are still tracking the products they make with paper. That can't keep up with Agile. If you think about what Facebook or LinkedIn or Dropbox or Google tries to know about its user base, they make what's called a digital twin of every human on the planet, whether they have a Dropbox or LinkedIn or Google account or not. And that digital twin tries to say, what phone do they think you're using? What apps are on that phone? What laptop, if any, do they think you're using? What types of software do you usually use on that laptop? Who are your friends that you share files or information with? What software do they use? Who were your friends a year ago? And what phone did your friends have a year ago? That is all part of the digital twin model. And it's unique to every individual. Well, Tesla has to do the same thing for their cars because every single car could potentially be different. Every car has a digital twin in Tesla, a full simulation, and it says what glue is used where. If the car came in for service and something was changed, what was changed and when? What apps are installed on the car? Who do they think uses it the most? There's a full digital twin of every single Tesla product. That allows maintenance. Now, maintainers aren't trained in all 100 versions of a heat pump, for example. Instead, the maintenance staff is trained on how to unplug a heat pump and plug in a new heat pump in less than 3 minutes. For example, every part of the car. The car is built like a puzzle, and you pop out parts and pop in new parts. If a customer has a legitimate warranted issue, the maintenance technician arrives in a Tesla, pops out the part to be maintained, and pops in the new part. They don't have to be trained in all the details of every version. The potentially failed part is brought back to Tesla for analysis. So Tesla wins. They get deeper understanding of any potential failures. The customer wins. If there's a warranted issue, they get a new part, they get an upgrade, they get the latest version. And Tesla wins again because they don't have warehousing or detailed training costs. This is the Agile maintenance model. It's exactly the direction the whole world is going. It's far cheaper, it's far faster, and it's higher value to the customer. If you want to learn more about the technical practices that make this agility work in mass production and new product design and new product development, I highly recommend Paolo Samichelli's landmark book, Scrum for Hardware. It's now in version 2. There's a link to download a free preview that Paolo Samichelli gave me, and I'm sharing it here. You can see it on the screen. I'd recommend reading page 13 and 14, and that references my original company, Team Wikispeed, that helped develop some of these practices. Here's what it really looks like. This is DevOps, developers and operations working together in one team for a faster feedback loop and faster speed of release. In hardware, developers mean drawing 3D models, simulated CFD and FEA, computational fluid dynamics, and finite element analysis, and procurement. So the same people are on the phone checking prices, asking for supply lead times. Test is then robots, simulations and robots. Integration is what you're seeing here, and that's robots. This is continuous integration in hardware. Now these robots might hold completely different parts 3 hours from now. So the robots have flexible hands. They can hold different types of parts at the speed at which they're reprogrammed. So the development team helps these robots reprogram themselves. A lot of the reprogramming is machine learning, but developers guide and check the robots' reprogramming to match the new parts. The parts themselves have interfaces. This is like an API. How are these parts going to connect? They're contact points, but it's also data sharing, load sharing, heat transfer, cooling transfer, etc. through the vehicle. These interfaces are intentionally simpler to reduce the cognitive load on the development teams, so the development teams can more easily think about how these parts go together, even though the robots could handle very complicated interfaces. Some of the interfaces do get complicated, but then they are refactored to reduce cognitive load. The interfaces can change anytime, as long as the parts on both sides of the interface change in sync. So this requires a sync across teams to introduce new interfaces at the same time. Automation in hardware and software and management with test in the loop is in fact the answer. Humans are for creative problem solving, and automation is for everything else. Even the decisions the teams make are heavily guided by machine learning algorithms. I was lucky enough to work with Bill Gates from 2008 to 2010. I was a developer in software at Microsoft, and then I worked as a Scrum Master at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, working on child, newborn, maternal health, and other social good projects, like helping roll out the rotavirus vaccine globally. And Bill Gates tried to teach us and me, do as much as you can in parallel. In fact, every meeting I was in with Bill started with, how much of this can we do in parallel? That stuck with me. It was a massive scaling, massively parallel execution model. And when I operated Agile at Tesla, I tried to do what Bill Gates taught me. If you have a car and you're going to redesign the entire car, that is a 5 to 7 year project. So how does Tesla do it 3 hours, about every 3 hours? Well, if you cut the car in half with a stable interface, you can change each half of the car completely independently. Now you have 2.5 year projects. Truly, that's how it works. If there's no ripple effect between those two halves, they can change independently. If you can cut them in half again and again, you have 8 3/4 of a year projects. Well, how do you get from 3/4 of a year to every 3 hours? That's where small, co-located, cross-functional teams with heavy automation and excellent technical engineering practices speed up the rest of the way. And it ends up looking just like what Henrik Nieberg said Spotify looked like. A lot of Agilists are familiar with something called the Spotify model. Henrik Nieberg famously said, "Don't call it a model. That's a snapshot of how a company called Spotify looked at one point in time. They even look different now. They continue to learn, and they even look differently now." That may be true, and I appreciate Henrik Nieberg's humility, but that model is genius, and it works super well. And here's what it looks like in hardware. You have these module teams. For example, the heat pump. That team has every skill required to make decisions about the heat pump and execute, build, test, and manufacture the heat pump in the team. That way they're not waiting on anyone else. So you don't have central services like central mechanical engineering. that would create a queue in front of central mechanical engineering and all these other teams. So these teams operate completely independently. This is what is called full stack. Full stack means your team can release independently, design independently, test independently, make decisions and spend money independently from the entire rest of the company. If you did have to ask anyone else anything, you'd get a response in less than 1 hour. That's what full stack means. So my job was to try to create full stack, completely parallel executable teams like Bill Gates had been trying to teach me. And this is exactly what my best friend, Paul Tacken, rolled out across ING Bank, which some of the largest consultancies in the world have called the most successful Agile transformation in the world. Congratulations, Paul Tacken. And this is what I prototyped in my company, Team Wikispeed. Now, since every team has their own procurement, for example, how to keep them in sync or how to keep them sharing knowledge and not working in very different ways. That's where processes like Lean Agile Procurement, LAP, come from. That might be called a community of practice or a quality circle or a tribe or a guild, where people with similar skills across different areas of the company can coordinate and collaborate. This has become one of the 2 things named after me. I got to be a little famous from this concept. The modules of the system define the structure of the organization, or the modules of the product define the structure of the company. Instead of having a mechanical engineering group or a procurement group, we have a heat pump group, we have a Tesla Cybertruck group, and they're autonomous from the rest of the company. And that's faster and it costs less, and honestly, it's more fun and more engaging. I was lucky enough to work with the leadership team of Amazon in 2016. And Jeff Bezos stressed these groups, these teams, should be small. The reason why is then you have higher rate of innovation. There's a higher engagement across the group. People are more likely to volunteer new, maybe even disruptive or innovative ideas in the group. This happens right around 6 people. Some of these groups are as big as 250 people. To be full stack, that's how big some of these teams are. The goal is to try to make them smaller. And what I've learned is mob is the fastest way I've seen to get a group of 250 people to share information so much that they can split into 2 groups and each group gets as much done. I'm using now the driver and navigator pattern. The driver draws the CAD model or is on the phone to order the part or talking with the vendor. The navigator tells the driver what to do. So the navigator is doing most of the thinking and the driver is doing the talking or the typing or moving the mouse cursor around or configuring the robot. Then everyone else on the team is giving advice to the navigator. This is absolutely exhausting to the driver. It's actually really fun and invigorating and refreshing to the navigator, and it's very relaxing to all the other team members. The roles are rotated. I like to do it random, about every 7 minutes, and it goes all day. In 2 or 3 months, even on a 250-person team, you have so much shared learning that you can reasonably split that team into 2 teams that are fully capable. They can do as much as the 250-person team could before. You've doubled your output for the same amount of people. In 2 or 3 months, those teams can likely split again. And the target is to get around 6 people, which is what Jeff Bezos stressed in Amazon. And here's what it looks like. You have self-organizing, cross-functional, small, co-located development teams, each working on their own piece of the product, not waiting on anyone else without shared services holding them back. There are company as a service teams. Those are like facilities. Does everyone have access to the factory? Does everyone have access to purchase new robots? Does everyone have access to training to service and program robots? And if anyone shouldn't have access, has it been revoked? They'll have a service level agreement, and it should be 5 minutes or less. The faster, the better. There is a funding team to make sure there's a huge pool of money available in the company that the teams can independently pull from, and they justify that pulling of money with their KPIs and OKRs. Now, interestingly, in a company like Tesla, we don't manage people. We don't measure people. We measure the product. Is the range of the Model Y going up? If so, our teams are working. Is the range of the Model Y not going up? If so, we have problems in our company. How do we manage that? But there's not a personal performance growth plan for people. That's not how it works. Your job is to improve the metrics of the product, and there aren't really metrics on people. There's also a coffee team where all across the Tesla facilities, there are live baristas and baristos. And it's their job to make whatever espresso or coffee drink you might like for free, 24 hours a day. And they try to do it world class. There's a gourmet team, and it's their job to try to make Michelin 3-star quality food available every 3 to 4 hours, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. This has everything to do with sustainable pace. I used to think, and a lot of people used to think, the goal was to get faster and faster and faster so you could finish your work and go home and start your life again. What I found working in the Musk companies is there's a different goal that might be even more rewarding. And that's to try to make the work so fun, so sustainable, and so healthy that you simply want to do it from when you wake up until when you go to bed, 7 days a week. That means it needs to incorporate your family. It needs to incorporate your pets. It needs to incorporate your healthy workout regimen. You should absolutely be able to have 6-pack abs and great skin, if that's what you want, working from when you wake up to when you go to sleep. So your work is this healthy thing that you desire to do, and you're not exhausted, and you don't want to collapse into your chair. If you do, there's something wrong with the way you're working. So it's not about escaping work. It's about making work ultra effective, ultra effectively productive, and totally sustainable and healthy. And that's what this ecosystem does. And I think that's the human side of the Agile Manifesto. If you want to learn more about the company structure that makes this work, please consider my book, Scrum Master. There's a link to read a free preview here on the screen. I'd recommend starting with chapter 2, which is what's the goal? How does a company work when this happens? You can connect with me on LinkedIn, Zing, Facebook, Twitter. I'd love to have a conversation with you. And this book summarizes the entire Agile transfer journey for existing companies, small ones, big ones, new companies, small ones, big ones, to get all the way to where the Musk companies are, if that's what you want to do. Working with Elon Musk is a tremendous rate of learning. Elon works directly on the line. So I never had to make a report to show to Elon to justify why we needed to buy new robots or new land to expand a new factory. Elon has worked every position I work and does regularly. So I don't have to make a report. We can just talk. Everyone can just talk. The moment you're hired, you're given a 4-page anti-handbook that says you can talk to anyone in any department at any level. There aren't really levels, but even if you thought there was levels, you can talk across levels. And you can talk to Elon. And Elon's there. Elon sleeps in a sleeping bag in the factory. He alternates sleeping in different factories or at SpaceX or Boring Company. But there's a percentage of the time where he's wherever you are, and you just talk. And if you need to buy something or build something, you just talk. So you don't have to make any reports. This is what keeps the company flat, this level of executive engagement and familiarity. Elon says Elon spends 80% of the chief executive officer's time engineering, drawing CAD, running tests on the manufacturing line. And it's true. So Elon understands. And you can talk to Elon and learn from Elon. And sometimes Elon's just 3 meters away, as is at some point everyone in the company. Elon says, if something is physically possible, not only is someone doing it, but there's an award show. I think this is often misunderstood. What Elon is saying is your only goal is whatever is possible according to the laws of physics, as long as the company can afford to do it. That means teams can self-organize and work independently. They're truly the definition of a self-organizing team, or a complex adaptive system, where the goal is known, the goal will never be exhausted, and teams can make decisions independently without waiting on approvals or each other. Teams know their goal is to make the safest car in the world. So as long as they can afford a safety initiative, they start it on their own without asking anyone. And the monitors all around all the Tesla facilities will show the real-time safety simulations increasing. And then the physical testing on 1 out of every N cars will then validate the simulation. Same with range. Simulated range, you'll see it climbing on the monitors around you as different improvements compound all across all the Tesla, SpaceX, OpenAI, Neuralink, and Boring Company facilities. Again, you don't manage the people, you manage the product. And management really means real-time, immediate feedback that everyone can see, and it's difficult to not see, which is what Kanban means, right? That's what Kanban really is. And Elon's a master of this. So you don't have to ask Elon anything. You simply see the metrics and self-organize to improve them, and that's your work every day. And it's the most fun I've ever had at work. What this also means is there's no marketing department. You don't have to benchmark anyone or anything. It's not about what's the range of another electric car, or is another company switching to electric. That's almost irrelevant to your day-to-day work. It's simply, according to the laws of physics, can this product improve in a way we can afford? And if the answer is yes, it's your duty to do it immediately. So there's no benchmarking, there's no competitive analysis, there's no comparative analysis. It's not needed, it's irrelevant. And here's the mechanism for risk reduction. SpaceX, another Musk company, builds the largest rocket ever made by humans. It's called Starship. And I'm showing here pictures of a Lego model of Starship. That's the definition of an extra large project. It's the largest rocket ever made by humans, and it's more complex. It lands itself, it's reusable, etc., 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 etc. In a traditional company, that project would have a leader, a large project leader, and they would have skills-based deputies under them. Someone would own mechanical engineering, someone would own launch operations, someone would own vendor management, and they would have teams under them and teams under them. SpaceX doesn't do that at all. Instead, they cut Starship into modules that can be built and designed at the same time, completely independently from each other. The goal is to make these small or extra small, so SpaceX can produce each of these modules in less than a week. And since all of them are being produced at the same time, SpaceX now makes a new Starship rocket about once every week. It's the entire strategy. And these modules are built by small, co-located, cross-functional development teams with their own procurement, their own tests, their own approvals. This is what is called object-oriented architecture, and this is the Agile risk reduction strategy. The optimum project size does get bigger. It increases as team technical excellence and automation improve. So I think the Agile developer practices are just as important once we have the architecture in place. And improving the architecture iteratively over time is also an Agile developer skill that can be trained and learned. Here's a picture of me in the inset at SpaceX Global Headquarters in Hawthorne, California. And the larger picture behind me is a screen capture of a sprint review of the Falcon Heavy rocket. The Falcon Heavy rocket is the largest operational rocket in the world today in terms of payload measured in kilograms into orbit. The Falcon Heavy rocket is an extra large project. It's made out of 3 Falcon 9 rockets strapped together. Those are 3 large projects, and they're built independently. A Falcon 9 rocket is made out of 9 Merlin engines. For a company like SpaceX, a Merlin engine is an extra small project. And Elon Musk has famously said, a Merlin engine has never been made the same way twice. Every single one is new product development and new product introduction. And SpaceX can make multiple Merlin engines a day now because they're so good at it. They've been doing it for, well, versions of it for 14 years, more than 14 years. And it's heavily automated. So the people focus on the design work and the production is mass and automated. When SpaceX has 9 Merlin engines, 9 extra small projects, they have a Falcon 9, a large project. When they have 27 Merlin engines, they have a Falcon Heavy, an extra large project. And this is the Agile risk mitigation strategy, taking these large projects, executing them massively in parallel, independent from each other, and having them aggregate to make something world-changing and best in the world. The Standish Group has been measuring project success since 1985. A successful project means on time, on budget, and a failed project means scrapped. All money spent and nothing ever used. And we can see even a waterfall project where we intend only one release and not a sequence of improvements. If it's small, it actually has a pretty high success rate. If a project is large, even if it's agile, it has a very high failure rate. The most successful on time, on budget projects in the world are small and agile. And that's exactly what the Musk companies do. And that's exactly what I recommend to every company all around the world, is try to figure out how to take your extra large projects and, like Bill Gates said, cut them into extra small parallel executable projects. And then you restructure the company around those. That's what's called an Agile Transformation. So instead of having central skills-based groups, your company manages independently executing extra small project teams. For more information on that, I recommend my book, Scrum Master, the Agile Training Seminar for Business Performance. Chapter 16, Switch, is exactly how to conduct an Agile transformation for an existing company, whether it's a huge company with hundreds of thousands of employees or a small company with 2 employees. This is also how manufacturing works and production works. Instead of building one massive building, companies like Tesla and SpaceX build modules next to each other that in aggregate make the largest buildings on the surface of the earth. These buildings are built module at a time in what's called modular XY construction. Here's what it looks like closer up. We start with a tent where people are doing the engineering work, in this case designing and building new batteries in a tent. Then the new cube of the building is built over them, with real-time feedback between the people constructing the building and the people working in the tent, so that the building constructed matches the needs of the people doing the engineering in the tent. And they actually switch roles, so the people doing battery engineering help build the factory, and the people building the factory actually help do battery engineering. If you have older buildings that weren't built with modularity in mind, we refactor. We install pylons in the existing building so they can hold more weight and test it, validate it, permit it. Then build what's called modular Z construction, new buildings on top of buildings once they've been reinforced. Again, the new building is built with feedback from the people currently working in the existing building, and they switch roles. The people doing the engineering work will help do construction and vice versa. This makes it more likely that the newly built structure is fit for purpose. And here's how it really starts. These are Agile NPI teams, new product introduction teams, and they walked out to where there was room in the parking lot, and they started setting up shades. Because this is Fremont, California, and the sun, you'll get a sunburn if you work all day. So you set up shades and you order tarps and tents from Amazon, legitimately from Amazon, delivered in some cases 60 minutes or less. And you set them up, string them across the boxes that parts came in or shipping containers, and you set up laptops and you work. And you start fabricating parts, cutting metal, laying up composites, creating new equipment. Projects of all sizes are made this way. While I was working at Tesla, the rear half of the Tesla Model Y, which is an SUV or a CUV, was changed from a series of stamped metal panels to a casting, which is an entirely different technology. And that would have been a large project change in any company anywhere in the world. Well, in a company like Tesla, that just means the next Model Y you might see has a completely different rear half. And your job is to still connect wires to it, still paint it, still apply adhesives, just like you would anything else, until it meets the definition of done. And the next 100 Model Ys, for example, might be back to stamped panels. And then the next one might be a different casting. And that changes multiple times a day. And almost no other company in the world works this way. And this is what Agile is. Each team keeps track of their own work with a team working agreement and a team board. So you know who's doing what. I've mapped that to the Scrum roles here. Some people that might be watching the session might be very familiar with Scrum. You can see how these roles can be made visible even in a company like Tesla, along with what that team is doing now and what they intend to do next and their rate of completion. To track hundreds of companies at once, we have an Obeya room, it would be the Toyota term, or I call it the group Scrum board, and each team has a row. And we see what teams are getting done each sprint. Are they making a new heat pump? Are they changing a wiring harness? Are they changing the thickness of wires? Are they changing the metal wires are made out of? You can see that flow across all the companies in the business. You also can see how much money each team is spending and an approximate machine learning assessment of how much money that team is making for the company. And that's difficult to calculate sometimes depending on what's being done, but it's guessed and assessed and it's heavily augmented by machine learning. So you have a profit and loss essentially per team. This allows you to at a glance run the financials of the business in real time every second. If you're using Scrum to move towards continuous deployment and continuous release like Tesla, I'll recommend Group Scrum, where your Scrum Masters will run Scrum of Scrums, and your development teams will run Daily Scrum, and your product owners run Meta Scrum. This will help you move towards what Tesla is doing. I'm Joe Justice. I'm the chair of the Agile Business Institute. I'm the author of the Scrum Hardware Guide, and I'm the creator of the Extreme Manufacturing Methods. I've been interviewed on Good Morning America, USA Today, Fox News, in Asia, the Asahi Shimbun and the Nikkei. I've been in Forbes, Harvard Business Review, CNN Money, TED.com, the Discovery Channel, and I'm very happy to have shared the best I've learned so far about Agile hardware with you. You can reach me at joe@abi.group. You can reach me on Twitter, Joe Justice on Twitter, and I'd be happy to connect with you on LinkedIn or Zing. Have an amazing day, and I wish you Agile successes for faster new product introduction.